Okay, so it's great to see everybody. And
Good to be here. Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you for coming. We last week finished up chapter 5, which I said was kind of completing one section, and that was building the full view of what the godly soul is, godly soul's powers, what the godly soul wants. And this week, we're going to move on to the animal soul, the other side of the equation. It's important to remember what the godly soul is made out of. It's made out of the 10 powers, 3 intellectual, 7 emotional, plus the 3 clothing, if we want to call it, the thought, speech, and action, which allow us to connect to God. And we spoke about deeply what is it that godly soul wants, mitzvahs, Torah, and all that good stuff. This week, we're going to talk about the opposite, okay? And of course, as always, we have to start with a joke. So the joke goes like this. I spent hours trying to find out what the opposite of night was. But in the end, I just had to call it a day. Okay, all right.
That one was terrible.
Well, that's the idea. Okay. So
I like that one.
Okay. All right. It's intentional. That's the fun part of it. So I'm saying that because we're talking about opposites. We're going to talk about opposites. And this is really the idea here today. We're going to talk about opposites. In fact, this is the first line we're going to read today. So I'm going to start off with a line and then we'll get into the discussion about it. It's chapter 6, page 83. So chapter 6, page 83 starts off like this. The previous 4 chapters have elaborated on the divine soul, its nature, chapter 2, its mental and emotional powers, chapter 3, its garments of thought, speech, and action, chapter 4 and 5. In this chapter, we return to the animal soul discussed in chapter 1, which is the source of negative self-centered consciousness. And we quote from Ecclesiastes. We say like this, now God has made one opposite the other, Ecclesiastes 7:14. To empower us with free choice, God has set the positive and negative forces within the universe in perfect equilibrium. The positive and negative forces have not only the same amount of power, they also have the same architecture. So we're going to pause here. This is the main word we're focusing on. These are 2 opposites. So let's break this down. What opposites? The first thing we have to understand is like this. Sorry, I'm just going to mute everybody for a moment. And you're welcome, of course, to unmute for any questions. This makes the recording clear. When we talk about opposites, if you read the chapters 2 through 4, 5 actually, you might come away with this feeling that, we're just these super, super holy people, right? I mean, you read all about our godly soul and how everybody has a godly soul. There's just differences because of the gestation period and what our godly soul desires. And so the author Rabbi is saying, hold on a moment. Obviously, you've studied Tanya, you know there's a godly soul. But if you're ever wondering why it's so difficult to do the right things, that's because you have an animal soul. And not only do you have an animal soul, you have an animal soul that is an equation. It is a mirror of the godly soul. So it's not just a other force. It is an equally powerful force built out in the same exact way. Why? Obviously, because if we want to talk about free will, in order for there to be free will, you have to have an equal power on either side. Okay? So you need to have opposites that are equal. Now, a lot of times when we talk in English, when we say opposites are not necessarily the same. For example, light and dark are opposites, but they're not the same at all, right? Or fire and water, a dark, black and white, plus and minus, good, life and death. They are opposites, but they are not equally the same, right? That's what we have to understand here. Is not only are they opposites, but they have an equal power, an equal track to each other. Okay, again, saying the word opposite in English doesn't fully express what we're going to present over here. I'll give an example. The closest example we can have to this is the Talmud says, whatever exists on dry land exists in the sea. In other words, there's a, so to speak, a counterpart for every animal and every flower on earth in the sea. It's not just opposites, they have their own build out, their own entire ecosystem. Okay. Now, these opposites of good and bad exist not only within the world, as we'll discuss in later chapters, but as we're going to discuss in this chapter, these opposites and these two powerful opposite forces exist within us. If you were to imagine a Moses and a Pharaoh, okay, two opposite powers. Obviously, Moses is more powerful. And as we'll probably eventually discuss at some point later in the Tanya, how the godly soul is in a way more powerful than the animal soul, but it's not apparent and it's not easy to tap into, which is why it is considered free will. So in order to discuss opposites, let us recap. What is it that the godly soul wants? The godly soul is always curious. What is it that God wants? What is my mission in the world? What is the most important thing for me to do right now? How can I give the most of myself to make a change in this world? If you notice, all of those line items have a lack of ego in them. Okay, it's completely mission and what I'm needed for and what I'm needed to do. On the other hand, no worries. On the other hand, you have you missed the joke though. I might have to repeat it later for you because it was really good. On the other hand, you have the animal soul. The animal soul is always interested in where am I in the picture. So instead of what's my mission, it's what can I get out of this? Instead of what does God want of me right now, it's what do I want right now? Instead of what benefit can I bring to others, it's what benefit can I bring to myself? Now, sometimes the animal soul, by bringing benefit to others, brings benefit to itself, and therefore it's something that it desires, but it's always about me. That's the animal soul. Now, I want to also caution, the animal soul actually has 3 different names. It's sometimes called the nefesh hachiyunis, the soul of life, because the animal souls we discussed in chapter 1, you can go back to our classes, is the soul pretty much that gives us life. The godly soul is enmeshed with the animal soul. Then you have nefesh hativis, the natural soul. It's nature. Our nature is from the animal soul. Eating, drinking, all the different things, nature comes from the animal soul. And finally, it's called the animalistic soul. Now, we did discuss in chapter 1 that this animalistic soul, which is the main name we're going to use, is not necessarily evil. Okay, there's a difference between self-focused and evil. Okay, it's not evil. It by focusing on yourself too long, you can get to evil tendencies, but it's not necessarily evil. It's just self-focused. Okay, that's its desire in this world. Now, for self-focused reasons, you can do good things. That's the difference between evil and good. In other words, I can live an entirely great life, helping the entire world, yet living entirely my life with my animal soul. Okay, maybe what I seek most in life is honor. And because I seek honor, therefore, there's many things that I'm going to do. So I can live an entirely honorable life, but yet it was always my animalistic soul. Now, how do you know if it is your animalistic soul or not? Well, that will come out in certain instances, when when there's something good that you can do, but it wouldn't bring you honor, you probably wouldn't get to do it. But the point is that the animal soul is the opposite of the godly soul. It's self-focused as opposed to the godly soul, which is always about mission-focused and connecting to God, leaving itself. There is another name that people use when we talk about animalistic souls, and that's called Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. And as I discussed in chapter 1, the Yetzer Hara is not entirely the animal soul. The evil inclination is a part of the animal soul. In other words, when the animal soul is being pushed to do something evil, it will be called Yetzer Hara, will be called the evil inclination. It has an inclination to do evil, to do bad things. But as I mentioned a moment ago, the animal soul can just be animalistic, not necessarily evil. Okay. Just an interesting example of this idea that the animal soul is just self-focused and it can come out in different ways. There's a Mishnah on Pirkei about ethics of our fathers that says Hakina va'taiva va'kavod motzin adam min olam. That kina, jealousy, taiva, desire, kavod, honor, remove a person from this world. What basically the Mishnah is saying, those are very evil character traits. And some people explain that Mishnah is actually a description of how our life goes, our animalistic soul. We first start off in life, kina, we started very jealous. Little kids, they can't understand other people having anything. We're extremely jealous as children. Then as we get older, our animalistic soul moves more into taiva, pleasure. We seek out pleasure. As we get, teenager and older, we always pleasure seeking. And then finally, the last stage of our animalistic soul as we get even older is what we seek is kavod, honor. That is the last, so to speak, stage and journey of our animalistic soul. When not that we don't have the other ones, but our primary goal is honor as we get older. And these are all expressions of the animalistic soul as it lives here on this earth. So that just gives you an example. The animalistic soul, exactly what it desires changes over time, or what's dominant in what it desires changes over time. But the main theme that always stays is it is self-focused, whether it is jealousy, whether it is honor, whether it is pleasure, all of those things that it desires are all part of the animalistic soul. All right, so now that we have discovered that the godly soul and the animal soul are opposites, and that the godly soul is mission-focused on itself, the animal soul is focused on itself, which causes it, by the way, lots of worries. When you focus on yourself, you're full of worries because you need to know, am I going to get that thing? Am I going to get a promotion? Am I going to get that car? Am I going to get that house? Am I going to get this? Am I going to get that? It's a stressful life, actually, the animal soul. It's maybe more pleasurable in some ways, natural pleasure, not necessarily a lot of fulfillment, and definitely lots of worries come along with it. So it's not a better life in general. But anyways, we've discussed the animalistic soul is self-focused. So let's read the next lines over here and we'll explain. He says like this. When he says they're opposites, and as I said a moment ago, they have the same build out. So he says, just as a divine soul is comprised of 10 holy spherot or energies, and these 10 energies are dressed in the 3 holy garments of pious thought, speech, and action, right? This is what we said in the previous chapters, 3 powers of intellect, 7 powers of emotion, plus the garments, thought, speech, and action. So too, the animal soul too has a similar architecture of 10 energies and 3 garments of its own. Only the force which powers it comes from negative power of sitra achra, the other side of self-serving egoic energy. I guess that's the word, egoic. So the chapter is not going to break down the powers in detail. So we're going to discuss it, okay? Because we want to discuss the opposites. So let's try and describe these 10 powers in on the opposite spectrum, okay? So again, we want to discuss what does intellect and emotions of the animalistic soul look like. The Tanya doesn't describe it at length. It described the godly soul at length, and then it says, well, here's the opposite side of the coin. Well, let's discuss that opposite side of the coin for a moment. So let's break it down like this. We're going to start actually with the emotions, okay? The godly soul, let's discuss love. What does the love of the godly soul look like? Any thoughts? If it's not egocentric, what does a godly love look like? Okay, that's the first of the emotions. What does a godly love look like? Any thoughts? Right? The first one is called kindness or love. We discussed that at length. So what does kindness or love of the godly soul look like? Yes?
Yes. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Ken. Yes, so it's focused on the other person instead of on yourself, on the benefit of the other person. Welfare of the
Okay.
other person.
What would that look like? Present to me doing kindness to someone for your godly soul and doing kindness to someone from your animal soul.
Okay, so from the godly soul, for instance, I have to, let's say, a husband and wife. She wants to go to a place that he doesn't want to go to. He hates the place and he goes for her sake with her. Now,
Mhm.
he wants to go to a place that she doesn't want to go to, and he makes her go because he says he's the one that's calling the shots today, for example. I don't know. So it's just opposite. When he puts his desires and his needs before hers, and when he does the opposite.
Okay, but that's a good example. I was looking for, though, where you are helping someone else. So I want to take it a step further. How can there be a case where you're helping someone else, but describe to me what it would look like if it was coming from the godly soul or if it was from the animalistic soul?
How about giving anonymous tzedakah?
Okay, good example. Yep. So giving anonymously, which is the highest form of tzedakah, versus giving in public. Now, of course, I do want to mention that very often the Rabbi would tell people to give in public to inspire others to give. But nevertheless, even if you do that, I still think it's healthy occasionally to as well give anonymously to keep your emotions in check. In other words, yes, it's important to help inspire others to give, but it's also, you can give a little bit anonymously to build that muscle of understanding. Yes, even when I give publicly, it's really not about me, it's about God. So yes, that's one example. I would say also, let's say you give someone and they don't show the appreciation that you were hoping for. Do you get all upset at them? Or you're just like, well, it's sad that that's how they react, but, I was helping them. If you truly believe in the cause that you're helping, so they didn't thank me properly. That poor person, screamed at me. I gave them only $1 instead of $2. It happens, but that has happened to me. You give a poor person money and they scream at you for giving them too little. So you'll be like, all right, how do you react to that? That will show, where it's coming from. I also want to caution, of course, you should always do good things, even with bad intentions. Just putting that out there. We can't always wait till we have the best intentions. But as I've said many times, the Tanya is all about not only doing the right thing, but fostering a greater inner character to make doing the right thing better. So yes, we should always give, even when it's for the wrong intentions. But at the same time, we should try to work on ourselves to try and do things with the right feelings and try and work on our feelings, because that will give us the longevity of always doing the right thing. There's a lot of, just another example, there's a lot of love out there that the Mishnah describes as a lot of love is dependent on things, right? So you have a lot of people who love wealthy people. It's dependent on items and certain things and benefits that they may get. The Mishnah says the greatest expression of love was the love between David and Jonathan, David and Yehonatan. Yehonatan was the son of King Saul. Jonathan had everything to lose by loving David, who would ultimately usurp him for the crown. But yet he loved him and it was not dependent on anything. That is a godly love where there's no ego involved. It's pure care and love for the other, or pure care and love for God. Okay, let's talk about the next character trait called givurah, which is translated as severity. Okay, or severity, or as we spoke about, awe. Okay, so by the godly soul, we discussed that severity in the godly soul is true awe of heaven. In other words, not fear of punishment, which is again about myself, but I'm either in awe of God or I'm using awe on other people to inspire them in certain ways. Okay. What would severity by the animal soul look like? I think this is more obvious. Pure anger. Okay. When things aren't going your way, or when people are offending you, you get angry at them. That would be gevurah, severity of the animalistic soul, completely focused on you, not about a purpose, not about a mission. And obviously there's no fear of heaven involved in the animalistic soul in this. Of course, the animalistic soul may keep certain mitzvahs out of fear of punishment. That is possible. if you scare it enough, okay, if your mother maybe drilled it into your head, or whatever it is, Jewish mother guilt or whatever she did to you. But that is not, but again, that's self-focused, okay? Then the next one would be Tiferet, beauty, okay? The third attribute of emotions is known as beauty, which is kind of a mix of love and severity, but that's what's beautiful when you can mix the two together. But what is beauty in the godly soul? The godly soul would want beauty, for example, would want to build a beautiful synagogue. You'd want to buy beautiful mitzvahs. You'd want to get a nicer esrog, get a more special hadassim, or whatever, all different beautifying things for God, okay? So, when you spend more money on a nicer etrog, it doesn't get you a nicer vacation. It doesn't really get you much, right? But you're doing something to beautify God. When you spend more money in your home to get an upgraded mezuzah, nobody's going to know that, really. Nobody knows that the scroll inside of your mezuzah is a more expensive mezuzah, okay? But you know it. And why are you doing it? You're not doing it for yourself, obviously. You're doing it for God. That's what it says. We are beautifying God when we spend more money in these things, okay? So what would beauty of the animalistic soul look like? Someone who wants to impress others. You want to buy a nice house to impress other people. You want to drive the fanciest car, right? There's so many people out there who live in drab houses, but they buy fancy cars so that they impress people. You have today these people that walk around with these $150,000 watches. I mean, for what? Well, what's the point? I can't imagine it tells time that much better. $150,000 watch versus a regular watch. Okay, so we've described the three major emotions, and the rest of the emotions follow along on that path, and you can look at all of them each individually, but you get the idea. What an emotion, an animalistic emotion, looks like when it's focused on myself. Let us think now about the intellectual powers of the animalistic soul. And here, there is a fascinating difference between the animalistic soul and the godly soul. The godly soul, we've always described that you have to have your intellectual powers, as you meditate about God, you think about God, and then it will help you have emotions towards God and do the right thing, okay? With the animalistic soul, here's the question. What comes first? Do the thoughts come before the intellect, or does the intellect come before thoughts? Just 1 second. Everybody else is working. Okay. Okay. All right. Where should I sit? Oh, you could sit anywhere. So with the animalistic soul, does our intellect come before our emotion, or does our emotion come before our intellect? In other words, with God, I'm highly unlikely to feel love towards God without thinking about him. Okay? With the animalistic soul, do I need to meditate about chocolate cake in order to desire it? And you'd have to unmute yourself. Although if you're in person, you don't need to unmute yourself. I typically don't need to meditate about the animalistic desires that I have. We're in chapter 6, so I don't typically need to meditate. I'm saying most of the stuff outside right now. So I don't typically meditate about the things that I desire. So what role does intellect play in the animalistic soul? In other words, the intellect is not, I wouldn't say it's creating the desire. Okay, I don't need to spend time meditating on chocolate cake to want it. If you have to meditate about the things that you want, it's probably something wrong, right? In the animalistic desires, I would say. So the answer is that the animalistic soul, the intellect is used for two things. Number one, it's used to inform you about what there is around you. In other words, for example, children, right? Why do children go to fire? It looks exciting. They don't have the intellect yet to know that fire may look exciting, but it's dangerous, right? A child that's never tasted chocolate or never tasted ketchup does not desire it because they don't know it tastes good. So the intellect is used, number one, to inform you. And number two, the intellect is used to figure out how to get what it is that you want. So let's say you're a little child. You now know that chocolate cake tastes good, and you know that it's on the top shelf. So you are now going to use your mind to get a ladder or stand up on top of chairs and get to that chocolate cake. How would that look like for an adult? So an adult would, any desire that we have, say animalistic, self-focused. So every time I drive by on the street and I see someone else driving a fancy car, I want that car because they've got that car. I'm jealous. I want that car. So the intellect didn't really create that desire. Desire was pretty natural. The intellect informed you about it, and then you desired it. And now you're going to figure out, how am I going to get that car? You know, where am I going to get the loan to get it? And things like that. Let's give what I'm trying to present here is that in the animalistic soul, the feelings really come before the intellect. I'll give another example. Let's say you have, let's take some Jewish names, Sam, and normally I would say David, but let's pick another name. Let's say you had Sam and John is not a very Jewish name, right? Reuben. All right, Sam and Reuben. All right, so Sam offends Reuben. Okay, now Reuben wants to get back at Sam. So Reuben goes to his lawyer and he tells him his idea of how he wants to get back at him. And his lawyer says, well, that scheme that you have is a bad idea. How about you do it in this other way that'll be legal and you'll be getting back at him? And he says, oh, great idea. All right, in this case, the intellect is helping your desire. It is not creating your desire, it is helping your desire. The lawyer, so to speak, the intellect is helping your desire. But let's say, for example, Reuben, instead of going to a lawyer, went to a rabbi, highly unlikely, but let's say he went to a rabbi instead. And the rabbi explained to him that it's not a good idea to take offense and it's not a good idea to take revenge. In that case, the intellect creates the emotion, or in this case, kills the emotion, okay? What I'm trying to present here is that in godly areas, in our godly soul, the intellect creates or kills the emotion, and in animalistic desires, the emotions get the intellect working, okay? So again, to recap, the intellect of the animalistic soul serves two things. Number one, to inform you what there exists in this world, right? Unless you know about something, you don't desire it. Like the child does not desire ketchup unless it knows about it. So it serves to inform you. I think this is what advertisers are really doing. They're trying to present a picture on TV of something that looks very desirable, and then you will desire it. And then the second part is how you can get it. And I think car salesmen work on that as well. Well, it's only, $3.99 a month. And, you can, for $3.99 a month, you can be riding this wonderful car. Again, they're not creating your desire for the car. In that case, they are helping you to get it. And so this is why when Tanya will present the intellect and emotions of the animalistic soul, it will actually present it putting the intellect after the emotions, because really in many senses with the animalistic soul, I'd say the cart comes before the horse. The heart comes before the mind. Whereas in the godly soul, the mind always creates what is going on. In the animalistic soul, it's just the opposite. So let's take a look inside the text. And here we are on page we are on page 83, and we were in the middle of saying that just like we were saying, just like the godly soul has the full 10 powers, intellectual and emotional, so too does the animalistic soul. And then he cautions here something that I said a moment ago, that this animalistic soul, and I'm in the third paragraph at the bottom, he says specifically its power is from the force known as klipas noga. The bright klipos negativity is not irredeemable and can be realigned for the good. So this is something that I've mentioned so many times, in that, as I said, the animalistic soul is not necessarily evil, it's animalistic. An animal can be trained to do good things, so it's not inherently evil. Then he continues, while the animal soul is spiritual and not confined to a particular place, its point of interaction with the body is in your blood, where it is present. It is the source of your physical vitality. That's also why, we describe people, their blood is boiling. In general, as I said, the animalistic soul resides more in your emotions. The blood is very much connected with your emotions, your heart rate. They say today emotions are very much a bodily sensation. The feelings of, the sweaty palms, or the heart racing, or the heart slowing down, or feeling calm. All those are emotions, and very much present within your body. And that's why the animal soul, which is very much an emotional soul, is very much present in your blood. Now he says something interesting. The 10 powers within the animalistic soul are referred to the Zohar as the 10 crowns of impurity. So here I want to mention something I didn't mention before, I should have. He calls them the 10 crowns of impurity. If you recall, the 10 powers of the godly soul were called the 10 holy sphirot, or the 10 holy energies. These 10 powers are called 10 crowns. Why the word crowns? So this actually all boils down to what we've been discussing the entire time. The animalistic desires are very egotistical. And when a desire is egotistical, it's very much focused on itself, and you don't really work with others very well. That's the sense of a crown. Kings don't typically get along very well. A crown is, whereas the godly emotions work very well together, animalistic emotions do not. That's why we're always, we're focused on our animal. We're always full of conflicting things that we want, or actually, if we want to take this a step further, we can see this was going on in the type of discussion that goes on in the world today. Back in the day, I'd say we had more people who were focused on trying to help this world without focused much on themselves. Today, virtually all politicians and a lot of people, when they're discussing politics or policy or anything, I'd say it's very much in the realm of the 10 crowns of impurity. It's not necessarily mission focused. It's focused on themselves, whether it's honor, whether it's desire. They may believe they're helping the world, but it's very much from a lens of themselves. It's not very much starting from an egocentric place. When emotions are from an egocentric place, you have little space for others. You have little space to tolerate others. That's why they're called the 10 crowns. There's no space to tolerate. Ego doesn't tolerate others very well. So I would say the lack of cordial discussion, people being focused on themselves and how important their opinions are, and things like that, as opposed to say, I truly believe this is the best way to help the world or whatnot. And so therefore we have today a world in which there's no bipartisanship. And in fact, the word bipartisan is like a dirty word suddenly, because we're at such a point where there's a lot of me going on in all of these things. A lot of times also, a lot of these, sometimes I see these politicians, they're all looking for the next viral clip that they can put on their social media to send to their followers. And, that's the discussions they have. And when they can create a clip, it's not as much about trying to get something done. So it's just a note over here on the 10 crowns of impurity that I think we have a lot of that running around in the world today. So let's turn the page. By the way, it's not only politicians. Just as I always say, it's always easy. What's that joke, right? The guy comes out to the rabbi after a sermon. He says, "Rabbi, that was so great you said that sermon. Sam really needed to hear that, And the rabbi's like, well, actually, you probably also needed to hear it too, So it's very easy to dish on the politicians. We always have to remember that the issues that go on in the world are also going on within us as well. And never to think about, oh, well, that person really needs to hear it. We have to work on ourselves as well. Anyway, so he continues. To sinner to engage in destructive behavior, you need to detach your consciousness from your inner self, which yearns to do good and wholesome. This is why negative forces are described as crown, which is detached from the head. All right, so that's another reason. There's different reasons given by the commentaries why it's called the crown. I'm not going to focus on that one. Okay, so then he continues. These powers of the animal soul consist of 7 negative emotional powers emanating from the 4 negative elements as mentioned above. That the 4 elements, fire, water, air, and earth, naturally give rise to 4 categories of negative behavior. Anger, like fire, always rising. Water, self-indulgence. We said all pleasure in this world has water in it. Air is shallowness, and earth is laziness, always just trying to fall down to the ground. So here's what I pointed out, by the way. He started off talking about the emotions. As I said, the animalistic soul starts from an emotional place, and then it uses the intellect to acquire what it needs emotionally. The divine soul shares the same architecture as the animal soul, 3 mental and 7 emotional powers. However, the way in which the emotions and intellect function in the animal soul is different. The divine soul's emotions will arise only after reflection. To love, one second, he's not the door here. Okay. Somebody wanted to wash the garments of their soul. Okay. The divine soul's emotions will arise only after reflection to love or revere an invisible God. Consciousness needs to depart from the tangible to the realm of abstract thought so as to perceive the universe in a broader context. You will never have any feelings for God unless you contemplate the meaning of reality first, right? In other words, God's invisible. It's kind of hard to connect and think about God unless you contemplate. Now, if you meditate very often, you can eventually come to a place where you see God very quickly with very little meditation, okay? But naturally, to see God, godly things needs meditation. For the animal soul, on the other hand, its emotions are natural and elemental, requiring little or no thought at all. They are lower states of consciousness into which you naturally regress unless you make a concentrated effort otherwise. Now we'll talk about the intellect. The intellect of the animal soul, which produces negative emotions and behaviors, mirrors the divine soul and is divided into 3, which are chachma, inquiry, or as we call wisdom, bina, cognition, or as we call understanding, and das, recognition, or as we also call knowledge, the source of the emotion. See chapter 3. While thoughtless, visceral emotion represents the core behavior of the animal soul, it is not devoid of intellect. For even a pleasure-seeking impulse is based on basic knowledge, e.g., ice cream tastes good, and therefore you want it. As he continues, because the emotions are relative to the intellect. Now he says a very, very interesting and important line, which is why a child desires and loves small, trivial things. Let's turn the page. Since his intellect is too small and immature to appreciate anything more valuable. Similarly, the child is angered and infuriated by small things, and the same is true with showing off and other negative traits, which are all relative to the child's intellectual depth. In other words, the fact that children will pick a quarter over $1 because the quarter is shiny and the dollar is not, that doesn't mean that they have a less animalistic soul than the adult, right? And it doesn't mean that the adult who desires $1 over the quarter is more sophisticated, okay? Or, it just means that your understanding of pleasure is better. And so because you understand pleasure better, therefore your desires for pleasure will be different. Doesn't make you any better. So this goes back to like an example. You can look at an unrefined person and think that the person that's eating ice cream has more of an animalistic soul than the guy eating steak. It's not true. It could just be that somebody's elevated their palate. They have a greater appreciation for steak over, ketchup and ice cream. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they've refined themselves and become better. They just have more refined taste. So that's just something to think about in ourselves. When we think maybe we've become better people, sometimes we have to think about maybe we've just become more sophisticated animalistic souls. Okay, our animalistic soul has become more sophisticated. We're not necessarily better than the other person, because it's very easy. I see a lot of people look down at, I don't want to use any, be careful what words you use, but what do we say, people from the South, or, you can look at people in different areas and say, oh, we're so much better than them because of, we're not into the things that they are into. But that's not necessarily a reflection of you being better than them. That just may be a reflection of you being more sophisticated than them. So we have to stop for a moment, because what we're trying to do in this chapter is understand ourselves, and what we've been trying to do the entire Tanya. So what this chapter is teaching us is now the ability to evaluate every time that we have an emotion. We need to evaluate. Now, I'm not saying we will evaluate every moment, but there are times we have to evaluate, where is this emotion coming from? And what is it serving? I had someone call me the other day. Yesterday, he called me. He wanted to know what's the Jewish view of getting spanked, a Jewish view of discipline, because I guess he got it too much when he was a child, and he wanted to know, is Judaism against hitting your children? Is there anything in the Torah? Is there anything against it? The actual answer is no. I don't think there's anything there that's against it. The general view is that you have to educate your children with love, and you have to educate them in a way that is useful. Now, the spanking and hitting that used to go on in schools, where they used to hit your nails or whatever, and I hear from my parents, I don't think that was very useful. But we have instances and stories of great sages who hit their children. But when you hear the stories, you understand it's not the same. It's not just getting frustrated with your child and hitting them. So the two stories I'm going to present to you is, one story was, there was his name was Rabbi Blazinski. He had never hit his child, and the story was that one time his child was walking too far ahead of him, and it was he did something very dangerous. Basically, his child did something very dangerous. So the father of Meir felt that he should hit his child, teach him a lesson. But then he wasn't sure, is it really the right thing, or am I just going to hit him because I'm frustrated with him? And it says he went to his room for an hour, and after an hour, he finally decided the right thing was to hit his child. That's very different than the hitting that went on back in the day. Just another story was, this goes back also 250 years ago. These are stories that are written. That's how we know about them. So the story goes that there was a child who was torturing the animals. The family had animals, and this child was torturing the animals, and the father decided to hit his child. And the child started crying. But after the child started crying, he heard that his father in the other room was also crying. He was crying that he had to hit his child. And so he stopped crying. He understood that his father didn't really want to hit him. He was doing what had to be done to educate him. Now, obviously, everything depends on the society, okay? And today, one should never hit their child. And I think it's definitely not helpful anymore. Maybe there was a place for the occasional hitting in the past. You can have a discussion with child psychologists, therapists, and it's a discussion for another time. The point of those stories, though, was what is the purpose? And honestly, even though we don't hit our children anymore, there are some parents that are very psychologically abusive to their children without actually hitting them. The type of punishments you can pull off on your children as well. You can think, well, I'm a better parent because I'm not hitting them. This is what I kept saying before. Sophistication doesn't mean that you're better. So just because a parent is not hitting their child, they can actually be more damaging. The point is that whenever you do anything, you have to evaluate where is it coming from. And it's not always easy. Like the example before, that parent that had to sit an hour by themselves to figure out Why is it that I want to do this item to my child? And so the same thing is in our life is evaluating our actions and really evaluating our emotions and trying to figure out where it's coming from. And it's not always apparent and it's not always easy. It's not always easy to figure out where that emotion is coming from. That's what makes it so hard to, this is what makes it so hard to really better ourselves, because it is hard work. But that's why I say that the work of Tanya is a lifetime of work. As I said many, many times, and I'll repeat again. Obviously, if you're doing the right thing for the wrong reason, keep doing it. But at the same time, we look for long-term stability, and long-term stability is to better yourself. And in order to better yourself, you have to constantly evaluate yourself and see why it is, what you're doing and why you're doing it. This is, I do this in parenting, of course, as well. I have a bunch of little children and I'm always trying to perfect my parenting. Well, the same thing we all should be doing in our own personal lives, always perfecting ourselves, trying to become better people. And becoming better people, part of becoming better people, a big part of it is evaluating our emotions, because very often our emotions dictate what we do. And we have to think. So let's say someone leaves a dirty dish in the kitchen. We get very upset. Where is that emotion coming from? And you get upset, and how are you going to react with your spouse or with your child or whoever left that dirty dish there? Think to yourself next time, where is that anger coming from? Am I angry because now I have to wash it? Or let's say it was my child, or am I really just trying to teach my child responsibility? And that may make a difference in how you react and talk to your child. And that's a great example of the difference between the godly soul and animal soul. Remember, animal soul is all about me. So when you saw the dirty dish that your child left, you're upset because now you have to wash it. That's focused on you. Or you can focus on, I need to teach my child responsibility. And in that scenario, probably the way you're going to talk to your child is different if you're trying to give your child the ability to take responsibility. Any questions or comments? Because I've been talking here for a while, but it's such an important, because the Tanya doesn't spend a lot of time describing the animalistic emotions. And that's why I want you to think about it. This happens often in charity. You ever have should I give this person? Should I not give this person? And, I find that as well, not that, I'm very wealthy, but, sometimes people are asking me, and if I don't want to give, but do I not want to give because I really think it's bad for them, or do I, just dislike them, or always we're faced with this dilemma all the time. Is where is this thought process? Where is this emotion coming from? Or I want to get back at somebody, where is that thought process coming from? Try to always evaluate what is the source of what you're trying to do. Now you can't do this all day. Okay, you'll be up to your nose thinking and not doing anything. Okay, but there are moments in time when we think about these things, and there are moments in time when we probably should make time to think about these things. And this is what the Tanya is teaching us: is that the godly soul and animal soul are two opposites, but they contain the same exact emotions, and therefore it's always hard to evaluate what's the right path. Let us get to the last part of the buildup of the opposite of the godly soul. So let's take a look here. No, did we read that? Okay, so it says like this. All right, now we're going to talk about the clothing. So remember, we discussed in the godly soul, we had the 10 powers, which was 3 intellectual, 7 emotional. We've discussed now in the animalistic soul, the 3 intellectual, 6 emotional. Now we're going to discuss the garments, which the garments for the godly soul is chapter 4 and 5. We're going to discuss the garments as it pertains to the animalistic soul. So let's read like this. Having described the 10 core faculties, it's section 2 on page 85. Having described the 10 core faculties of the animal soul, its intellect and emotions, we now turn to its tools of expression, the garments of thought, speech, and action. While the garments of the divine soul are a vehicle for all things sacred, the animal soul expresses an opposing energy through its impure garments. Your conscious activities of thought, speech, and action might be pure or impure at any given moment, depending on which of your two souls is powering them. So think about it like this. Your godly soul and animal soul are pretty much fighting over who's going to get to use the garments at any given time, because you cannot have two different actions and two different thoughts and two different speeches going on at the same time. So at every given moment, think about this. You've got a war going on. Who's going to get control over those garments? This is like this. In other words, you can have conflicting emotions, but you cannot have a conflicting action. It's like trying to jump and not jump at the same time. Now, when you use these 10 impure powers of the animal soul to think, speak, or act, then that thought in your brain, or that word in your mouth, or that power of action in your hands or other limbs are called the impure garments, into which the 10 impure powers of the animal soul are dressed at the moment of action, speech, or thought. An important paradigm shift which emerges from the Tanya's doctrine of two souls is that there is no such thing as a spiritually neutral activity. It's an important line. In Jewish law, we find three categories of behavior: the religiously required, such as keeping the Sabbath and giving of charity; the religiously forbidden, such as eating pig or stealing; and C, ordinary acts which are neither religiously required nor forbidden, such as checking your email or buying clothes, right? So one may come to understanding, if you just read the book, the Code of Jewish Law, certain things are good, certain things are bad, and there are other neutral things. According to Tanya, however, it would be a mistake to conclude that this third category is spiritually neutral. Even an ordinary behavior will either promote God consciousness or ego consciousness, depending on your attitude. There is no third option. Either are or you aren't, okay? Unless you make an effort to carry out an ordinary act amid a higher awareness, the inertia of the animal soul will steer it to ego consciousness. That's your natural state. And he says like this: it is these thoughts, words, and actions of the animal soul that constitute all the things that are done under the sun, which are empty and a strain to the spirit. The Zohar writes in the Torah portion of Bala, also they are destructive to the spirit. So King Solomon writes that all the things of the sun are all empty and a strain to the spirit. Ecclesiastes. Why is King Solomon knocking all of these things that we do? Because he understood exactly as the Tanya says. If something is not godly, eating, drinking, going on vacation, taking a swim in the swimming pool, going to the gym, any neutral activity that you can think of, if there is no God consciousness involved, it is ego focused, and it's focused and if something is not godly, then it falls to the impure side. That's really the idea. You're either with God or you're not with him. You're either in holiness or you're in purity. Now, this is a tall order, which we're going to talk about more as the Tanya goes on. We're going to discuss more next week. But think about it. You go to the gym. You can go to the gym. You can focus on your beauty because you want to look the greatest in town, or you can focus on your strength because you want to show off. Or you just want to be healthy so you can have more pleasure in life. Okay, even focusing on being healthy and going to the gym can be wrong. But if you want to be healthy, so you can serve God more. Okay, for example, I went swimming last night. Swimming can be a pleasurable activity, or it can even be a healthy activity, or you can be doing it to be stronger, to be able to serve God. You know, the healthier you are, the better you can serve God. Now, we can serve God within our business. We can serve God in our gym. We can serve God in our food. We can serve God everywhere. It doesn't have to be a technical mitzvah. But that's the question in life. Is what I'm doing, is it about me or is it not? Is it about me or is it about my mission? And if it's not about your mission, then it's about you. If it's about you, then it's your animal soul. And then automatically it falls to the impure side of this world. Now, that is a pretty difficult thing to live with. But that's the truth. We are put on this earth to serve God. Serving God can and should take place at every single moment. And at every single moment, we are given the opportunity. Who is in the driver's seat? You know, today they have in therapy, they talk about the parts theory. If you've ever heard of it, IFS or other different therapies of the parts theory. The Tanya is definitely giving us an idea of the parts theory. You know, who is driving your bus? who is in control of you right now? Is it your animal soul or is it your godly soul? Everything, yes.
Okay, last question.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yep.
Right. Could you talk about the circumstances for when buying clothes is ungodly?
When buying clothes would be ungodly. So it probably falls into, okay, number one, if you're buying, as I mentioned earlier, you're buying a $150,000 watch, most likely it's to show off, right? Certain clothing can be to show off. You can also obviously buy clothing that the code of Jewish law would say you shouldn't wear. So that would also be ungodly, okay? Just by virtue of that. But assuming it's all, kosher things you're allowed to wear. And assuming even it's not to show off, okay? Showing off again would be a problem. Even assuming all that, if your basic life focus is just you, and you're not living life with a mission, then automatically it's about you. So you're buying clothing so you can cover yourself, so you can live life and enjoy life. So automatically, in line with your general lifestyle, if your lifestyle is not God focused, your buying clothing is also not God focused, and it's focused on you.
Well, can I give you a specific
Yeah.
example? Because the extreme example is God. Yeah, for sure. But okay, so
Yeah.
TV land can't see me, but I'm wearing a polo shirt.
Right.
Okay. And it's a blue polo shirt, so.
Yeah.
What was the thought process? Wow, I like this color. It makes me more presentable as a human being. It feels comfortable. It wasn't overly expensive. Okay. But it's beyond, clothing to cover up.
Right, but why is David eating? Why is David living? Why is David buying clothing? I'm hoping that you try to drill into your mind that I'm living for a higher purpose, and that will play out in your clothing. Now you can tell whether you are buying clothing for that at certain purchases. That's when they come out, when you're going to look at something, or you'll see this shiny new article of clothing that's really not necessary. And if you go ahead and buy it, it may be an indication of why you're buying clothing. You understand what I'm saying? It won't always be apparent. And like I said, the animal soul and the godly soul can buy the same article of clothing. They can actually do the same exact action, but one can be powered by the godly soul, one can be powered by the animal soul.
Yeah, well, so my interpretation is that this is not a godly act. That the strictest definition of a godly act of clothing would be chabad, right? Okay,
You mean buying white shirts?
And white shirts, yeah. Putting over
So my blue shirts are non-godly. Oh boy.
Rabbi.
Yeah. Hello? I didn't hear. Okay. Yeah.
So.
Sorry, I just said thank you, Rabbi, for the class.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Yep. Yeah. We're at the 1 o'clock mark. So if anybody wants to go, you can go. We're doing question and answer now. I did finish my topic for today. Yes.
Yeah, right. No, so it just, my interpretation of it is, according to the Tanya and Hasidus, like this blue shirt is not godly. And I get it, but I'm not sure how comfortable. I don't know.
So what I would say is, do you understand that exercise can be godly?
That's easier.
Do you understand that eating can be godly?
Yeah.
Working can be godly.
Yeah.
So buying clothing can be godly as well. It like I said.
But if it's not a white shirt or black pants,
it doesn't have to be a white shirt. You live a certain lifestyle and you're not expected to wear white shirts. I don't necessarily wear white shirts because I'm more holy than someone else, right? In fact, I remember when I was in yeshiva where everybody wears white shirts and suits. Within white shirts and suits, some guys would get really fancy white shirts and really hotsy-totsy suits and pointy shoes. So you can literally do the white shirt, black pants, and the suits and still be ungodly, doing it in certain ways. And so it's not exactly what clothing you get that defines. Listen, a wealthy person in Judaism should get better clothing, actually, but they always have to think. There's a famous story. The Alter Rabbi once asked one of his followers, why do you have a fancy house? He was very wealthy. He says, why do you have a fancy house? He says, listen, if I have a fancy house, the community meetings will happen in my house. If the community meetings happen in my house, I'll have an opinion at the community meetings. If I have an opinion at the community meetings, maybe I can bring more Chabad ideas into the community. So, that's a godly idea. There's nothing wrong with using your wealth if you have it, but you always have to evaluate it. And yes, if you're more wealthy and presenting yourself more prestigiously.
So we're Jews, and we're being evaluated every second. And like when we're at the restaurant, if we happen to not tip well, typical Jew. So even just wearing back to the shirt, if you happen to have an engagement with somebody who sees you as a Jew, like, oh, the appearance is a factor,
right,
in being accepted by others,
right,
and that could lead.
Appearance is important, yeah.
Okay.
But and you have to evaluate yourself, and sometimes you can be doing things for mixed reasons. You can be doing it for godly and ungodly, and that's part of actually the sin of Adam. Is when Adam sinned, the good and bad got all mixed. Sometimes we're doing things for
mixed reasons. This thing just put it into black and white terms.
It did put it in black and white terms. That's correct. What black and white means like this: if you're not doing it for godly reason, it's for sure ungodly, which is kind of new to most people. In other words, saying that, why would going to the gym be ungodly, right? But this is what the Tanya is presenting. Yes, Michael.
So how it seems very difficult to me to be able to train myself to always think about that every minute of every day. Is what are my motivations? Who am I doing this for? Because some things you just do. I mean, I wake up in the morning and I go to work. Now, going to work for me goes, I come into my office and I go on my computer and I do my work. So it's just rote. That's what I do. How would I think I'm doing this in a godly way? Because it just
the Tanya
doesn't enter into the brain.
So the answer is the Tanya discusses this later on, and pretty much the idea is like this. There's a reason we have prayers 3 times a day. When you start off your day right, and the morning service is the longest, and you get in the right frame of mind, the rest of your day will follow in that manner. And throughout the day, you remind yourself once in the afternoon and once again in the evening, and you can meditate for a moment here and there. And those are ways of keeping that focus alive. Okay, despite getting busy with the day. Now it'll be a constant battle, but that's the focus that you want to keep. It describes it as, imagine in the morning you build up this giant fire, and over the day it kind of dissipates, and then you got to stoke it a couple times. That's the ultimate goal of the Tanya, is that no, we can't just think about this once a week. You got to constantly work on this, not necessarily every minute, but at least every morning. Then again, possibly in the middle and the end of every day. Does that make more sense?
It does, but it still doesn't. So I do shacharis at 8 o'clock, and I pray.
Well, let's say before you eat, you sit down and make a bracha. That's a wonderful, opportune moment to think about why you're eating.
No, I wasn't worried about eating. I was worried about work, because work to me is the most interesting thing on how to make it godly.
Before you sit down and work, hopefully you've prayed. And you've studied, and now you're ready to get you're in the right frame of mind.
So
again, whether you're working for godly reasons or not will be expressed in certain choices you'll make throughout your workday. How you react to certain people who maybe get you upset in your business day, or certain business decisions you make. Those will be guided by why you're working.
Well, I always think about that. My decisions, I always think about: am I making the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I going down the right road with this? So I see that when I make my decisions. But just in doing the work and so forth, I maybe have to focus more.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. Like I said, it's about starting up. You cannot think about your intentions all the time. I mean, let's say you're doing exercise. You can, it's hard to really think every moment while you're exercising. I'm doing curls right now so I can be healthier, so I can, live a long life and serve God. But it's when you start, that's, why you're getting into it. And if you start with that in mind, then when certain things come up in the middle of it, then you'll make that decision. That will help make sure you make the right decision when you're in the middle. Does that make sense? So in other words, if you started your business day with the right frame of mind, then in the middle of the day, when something comes up, you'll be much quicker to make the right decision based on your godly soul, because that's the frame of mind you went into it.
So every morning I say my Modeh Ani when I wake up, that puts me in the right frame of mind.
That's a good start, hopefully, and then the more you add in more prayers, the stronger that conviction and feeling and connection to God will be present throughout the rest of your day. Yeah, Modani is definitely starting off on the right foot. That's, can always do more, all of us.
Always.
Always.
Thank you, Rabbi. I got to run.
Thank you. We will
I gotta
discuss
go
more
do
next
that work now that I'm in the godly mood of.
Yeah. Now go do the work while you're in the godly mode. We will discuss this topic more next week. So
Thank you. Yasha
Thank
Koach.
you. Oh wait, Dr. Yannick. Oh, he missed my joke. Okay. Wanted to torture him with my joke. Baruch, I won't share it with you. Don't worry. Okay.
I'm sure I'll hear it at some point.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All right. Good. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.